Hey everybody, welcome to another Synergy Session podcast with Eliani and Anna. And today we have a powerhouse real estate attorney, Stacy Valdez. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you guys for having me.
Awesome, thank you. We have some amazing questions and we're gonna walk you through. So let me go first. Stacy, for those of you who don't know you, can you please share a little bit of your background and what made you become a real estate attorney?
So I actually started my my legal career working in downtown Manhattan, working for a big New York City law firm, doing mergers and acquisitions. So prior to law, I worked at a big corporation. I did a lot of project management work. So in thinking about the trajectory of my career, mergers and acquisitions made sense. I was still in the corporate sphere, but now on the legal end of things. So that lasted for about a year and a half. It just wasn't the right environment for me. I left without knowing what I would do next, but just knowing that wasn't for me. It just didn't sit well with me, and I knew that I could figure out what made sense for me to do next. Within about a week, the world shut down, and here comes COVID.
Yep.
And I'm like, oh, wow, what did I do here? I'm like, now what? So my background in corporate America was in healthcare benefits. I worked on, big pharmaceutical contracts. And this pharmaceutical company was going through process of acquiring smaller companies. So I did that for a while. And then I got pregnant and my maternity leave was over. And they were like, so are you coming back to the office? And I was like, oh no, I'm not about this office life anymore. And truly, it was a great experience, but then I felt like I was a little bored. I went from like an 80-hour job in New York City to now a cushy, 40-hour job at home. And now I had this baby. I had to figure out like what made the most sense for me personally. I had, started saying out loud my goals of doing my own thing part-time. Because a lot of people, since graduating were like, hey, Stacy, can you help me with this legal problem? Or I have this going on. And I'm like, well, not really. Like, I don't do like personal, legal matters. And at the same time, one of my best friends was buying a house. And she said, hey, so I'm buying a house and I want you to be the lawyer. And I was like, well, why would you want that? I'm like, I don't know how to do that. She's like, come on, like you can figure it out. You figure everything else out. And I'm like, are you sure? And she was like, yes. So she was like, I just need a realtor. We happen to know a bunch of realtors personally. So find me a realtor and you're going to be my lawyer. So reach out to some of our realtor friends. I end up connecting her with someone. And I say to them, I was like, the only catch is that I'm the attorney. And they're like, oh, wow, okay.
And this is my first time.
And here we go. And I vividly remember, and I literally remember calling the realtor and I said, so what do lawyers do on these deals? And he's like, well, they go through the contract and they make a bunch of changes and, there's all these letters that are like exchanged. And, then you just help the deal like move along. At the time, I was still using a highlighter going through the standard realtor form contract. And I'm thinking like, oh, wow, every time I get a contract, this is what I have to do, not realizing, right? It all starts and ends with the same contract. And till this day, I'm very, proud that my rider started with that one that I worked on at 2, 3 a.m.
Wow. Yeah.
And that's how my real estate career started. And then when my, friends that were in real estate got wind that like, hey, she does real estate now, even though I really didn't. They're like, hey, the market is really busy. Our attorneys are busy. Can you take on a couple of clients? And I was like, do you trust me to do that? And they were like, yeah. And at that point, it was 2021. The market was peaking. And it literally became a sink or swim. And I, learned through trial and error. None of my clients from then have ever come back to complain. So I think I did pretty good.
Yeah.
And here we are with almost 900 deals closed. And that's how my real estate journey started on a whim. And honestly, with the trust of, my friend and realtors that just thought I could figure it out, and I did.
That's awesome.
amazing.
That's an amazing story. I always love to hear everyone's success stories and how everyone got started. And it's always crazy to hear how COVID has changed so many people's lives. It changed mine as well. So it's really cool to see that.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So with that, what are the most common legal mistakes you see sellers make before or after a sale?
I would say, I guess for sellers, I guess the mistake, or I wouldn't even consider it a mistake, but sellers are just naive sometimes. And even, perhaps like how they're guided by the agent is just, if you should be going into the transaction aware of what may, come back, right? So like, hey, sometimes sellers have no idea of like different liens that might be up against the house. Maybe old judgments against them, and that's okay, right? They're all things that we work through, but you'd be surprised how many times sellers are like utterly surprised by like, what do you mean? Like, we have to, figure this out. So I would say just not having that awareness, and it's something that I try and level set with sellers up front, because I hate it when people are surprised at the end.
Yeah.
And truly at that point, like, we're closing. So I always level set with sellers to say, hey, like, are you aware of anything that might come back? And if you're not, that's okay. I just wouldn't want you to be surprised when it's time for us to clear, these types of issues in order to clear title. Do you know about the realty transfer tax? Like some realtors aren't as good as others in terms of preparing them for truly what their out-of-pocket expenses are going to be at the end. And it is a case that sometimes I have sellers at the 9th hour that they're like, oh, nobody told me about that, so I'm not paying it. And I was like, well, that's not true, because I told you.
And now we are closing.
And actually we are closing, because otherwise you're going to get sued, and nobody wants that. So I would say that's the biggest, I guess mistake, not necessarily mistake, but, opportunity for sellers is just go into the transaction more aware of what may or may not come up, what they are expected, to pay at the end.
Got it. Those are some really good points.
Amazing. All right. So I have a question for buyers. What contingencies do you strongly recommend buyers never waive?
So never waive, I would say an oil tank sweep.
Yes.
Never, ever waive an oil tank sweep. And it's very standard, even with, seasonal investment buyers, investor buyers. The only thing that they will never waive is an oil tank sweep. So I think that's the norm in real estate. And it would be naive of anyone to like completely waive that, because it's so standard to keep that contingency.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I'd say I completely agree with that. We work with all types of different buyers, including investors, and we always recommend that at the very least the oil tank sweep be done always. So
Yeah, for sure.
So our next question kind of goes hand in hand with that. What's your take on the informational purpose only inspection clause?
Haha.
We've seen a lot of those come up lately.
As an attorney, I literally look at that and I'm like, oh yeah, haha, like it's informational unless,
Yes.
and that's where, having, the experience and just more of, the strategy with the team in terms of how do we implement, the unless part comes into place. But truly, like I never take informational purposes for, what it sounds like on paper. I know it makes sellers feel better. As does the as is provision, which anyone in real estate knows that, it's all phony. I think phony in the sense of the expectation is that the seller isn't doing anything, right? The expectation is that the buyer isn't going to request anything, which is great. But the legal reality is that they do still have the right to get the inspection done,
Or at least walk away.
or
right?
at least walk away. So yeah, I look at it and I'm like, oh, it sounds great.
Got it. So legally, at the end of the day, they have the right to still do that inspection.
Correct. Yep. And then it's
Awesome.
all about how do we create the back end protections in the contract for it.
Of course.
Okay, so you might be answering the same question, but this is a good one. What are the most common language agents usually often puts on a contract that you most likely is going to remove? So other than the for informational purpose only, is there any other language that usually get kicked out of attorney review, for instance?
I don't necessarily kick it out. It's not, when we see things like inspections are for informational purposes only, I always view my role as an attorney isn't to change the deal, it's to clarify the terms, right? So, my position is, it's for informational purposes only. Buyer, you understand that? Yes. But if a major structural issue comes up, we are going to reserve your right to, either negotiate it or to cancel the deal, or if we find an oil tank, for example. So I don't necessarily believe in kicking terms out. I mean, some attorneys, do and will, and I mean they are acting as they feel is in the best interest of their client. But there's other ways of protecting the client without completely rehauling what the agents have negotiated, which is usually the position I take.
Got it. And then on the flip side, is there any language you've seen being put into contracts that have actually helped buyers get their offer accepted?
Oh, yes. So a very standard one is limiting inspections to structural, environmental, mechanical issues, which, we all know it sounds great. Again, like sellers expect to see that, so there's no harm in putting that in there. But from a legal perspective, those are pretty broad categories where a buyer can still feel very comfortable and protected in moving forward.
Awesome.
All right. So how can agents and attorney work together more efficiently to keep the transactions moving smoothly?
From an attorney perspective and just smooth transaction coordination, I would say the more information we get up front, the better, right? If I have a copy of the MLS, if I have the seller's disclosure, if I have an HOA addendum, if I have, an LBP disclosure, maybe it was an FHA loan, we have that FHA up front. It sets the tone for a very organized transaction. And it gives me the information that I need to realign expectations with buyer or seller. And also just to keep attorney review as, quick and smooth as possible. If we have to, chase things around, or I'm calling the agents like, hey, like, we don't have, the MLS, so what's the HOA on this? Or,
It's going to delay the
it
process.
just delays it. It's not like it's the end of the world, but that's what makes a difference for us in being able to be as efficient as possible. Because then we're going into the transaction already with, clear guidance on what we're actually, working with.
Well, have you ever stopped a buyer from making a very costly mistake?
Yes, I mean, I would say the biggest is an inexperienced buyer with perhaps an inexperienced realtor and, like making all sorts of waivers. Like they are very common in the industry, but, you have to be working with the right people that know, what you're really up against in proposing, all those types of waivers. So, as an attorney, I do to a certain extent rely on the professional caliber of my referral partners to feel confident in,
course.
Those types of limitations or waivers. Because truly it takes, a team to pull it all together. So, if I see a contract that has a full appraisal waiver, I'm going to call the agent to say, how confident are you in, the comparables that you've looked at in proposing this for your client? I'm not going to change it, right? Like, unless the buyer completely doesn't understand what it means, but I am going to challenge the professionals involved, because at the end of the day, these people are relying on all of us, right? And feeling comfortable and moving deals forward. So I would say those are, I like to do that up front, in terms of what are those, having an eye for the red flags and what we know to be costly mistakes for buyers. So at the end of the day, I inform them of the risks that they're running. And I give them the best case scenario and the worst case scenario. And sometimes people are willing to, to take, the adequate risk, and that's okay too. But I am very transparent with, what it means for them.
You actually touched something that I feel that is very important for the audience, for our buyers, and for our agents. Let's talk about, and this is not one of the questions that we had for you, but let's talk about the waiver of appraisal or limiting the appraisal gap between X and Y, because that's something that we see it 99% of the times, especially if a buyer is going above the asking price. So I want you to explain to the audience what's the difference of waiving completely. Like, does it mean that if the house doesn't appraise, are they liable for buying the house cash? Or, if we just kept it, when is it risky, when is it not? So I want you to go a little bit more into that with, expecting that the buyers are going to be listening and our agents who are actually writing these clauses into the contract.
Sure. So there are two different types of true appraisal waivers. One is a bank waiver, okay, and that really depends on the mortgage loan officer and the program they're applying for, the buyer's applying for, and how much they're putting down, and whether they can get a desktop appraisal and waive it up front. And the bank will literally say, hey, based off of this desktop appraisal, the amount of money that these people are putting down, and the overall qualification of the buyer, the bank will waive the requirement from a lending perspective against the collateral. That's
Best case scenario.
best case scenario.
Absolutely.
Doesn't happen often, but best case scenario.
We had a few, but yeah.
When the bank waives it, a buyer still has the option to get it done. And if they do, it could work in their favor or it could work against them, right? So that really predates usually like an attorney's involvement, right? Because obviously people are getting like their pre-approvals and everything before. But when I see those waivers, I will ask, like, is this coming from the bank or is this coming from a contractual negotiation perspective, which is the second option, where the buyer waives the appraisal contractually, and they're essentially saying to the seller, hey, regardless of what the bank finds the property to be worth, I would put my money where my mouth is, and I would still proceed with the contract value at X, which would be like the negotiated purchase price. And those tend to be riskier, right? Because you don't have the bank's stamp of approval on that, right? Yeah. You're still going to have to go through the appraisal process if the bank hasn't waived it. So in those scenarios, as an attorney, I ask the buyer, like, do you understand what that means, right? And most times they do, right? Like if the agent has done a good job at explaining it, they have. And the agents that differentiate themselves and are, confident enough in suggesting those types of provisions are because they've done their homework, right? And they found that there is enough value in the property based on, comp reports or, whatever they've looked at to put together the offer to substantiate and help the buyer feel comfortable in, one, presenting that offer, and two, in waiving the actual appraisal. The other types of waivers would be limiting the gap to which a buyer is willing to cover. Sometimes it's a $10,000 difference. So as an example, if I made a $600,000 offer and I'm waiving the appraisal waiver for up to $10,000, then from a legal perspective, that means that as long as the contract appraises for at least $590,000, I would still pay $600,000 because that's $10,000, in terms of the difference. So we see them often. It varies a lot in terms of the market climate, how much of a buyer's market it is versus a seller's market. We tend to see it more in a seller's market. And truly, buyers should be informed and agents should be informed about the legal risks that are being taken. But just because it's a legal risk doesn't mean it's a practical risk if there is enough to substantiate and support, what's being presented.
Yeah, now we've done it multiple times. I always tell my buyers and my agents, listen, if you are going to put an offer that's above the asking price and you're not willing to waive the appraisal or at least the appraisal difference in the seller's eyes, your offer is as good as asking. Because if the offer is a 600,000 and we're putting an offer 700,000 and we're now waiving the appraisal or at least the gap, honestly speaking, that offer, if you don't have all of that backing that we would do the research for, the offer is as good as 600,000. So you kind of have to work, and understand the buying power of each buyer and how much money they're putting it down. And now it's a perfect time to work with the lender and say, hey, Mr. Lender, if this comes in, sure, 50,000, can we work something around, right? So I think when in doubt, always ask, right? Ask the attorney, ask the lender before presenting that option to buyers, because the buyers, they're just desperate. They just want to get the offer accepted, right? So we just have to, we are guiding them. We're the glue keeping this whole transaction together. So the more informed we are with the team, the better we are protecting the buyer or the seller.
Correct. And and I would say that, my 2 cents for a listing agent reviewing offers with these types of waivers is, what has the buyer provided you with to give you the reassurance that they actually have funds to put their money where the mouth is. When they're on the buyer side, it's a little different, but when you're on the listing side, you do have that control, right? So how much are they comfortable presenting to you so that you can get that reassurance from for your seller that, you're actually going to get this X amount of dollars because there's sufficient, assets in place to cover if needed.
Yeah, so that was all very well explained. And I think what's most important here for everyone to understand is it's a team effort and it takes a lot of people to come together to kind of make it come to fruition. So it's important to understand all the aspects of what it really means to waive appraisal or to limit an appraisal. So always, when in doubt, always ask.
Yeah,
all right.
Correct. Is there anything we forgot to ask you or anything that you feel that's important for the audience to know?
I always remind the client at the end of the day about how many hands it takes, to get them there. A buyer is usually used to speaking directly to their realtor. Some realtors are, amazing enough where they're triaging everything for the loan. In a lot of cases, they may be triaging for the attorney. Sometimes people just don't like talking to the attorney. And I'm like, I prefer to be speaking directly to people. And that's, I do that at least, at the intake, but throughout the transaction, sometimes it's just easier, right? And I feel like at the end of the day, some people, agents included, they lose sight at how many people it took, to get there. And, and when I think about it, I'm like, you have a minimum of a buyer's agent, a listing agent. You have, 2 attorneys. You have, 2 transaction coordinators, right? Like people on the agent side, that are helping to coordinate everything. Probably have 2 paralegals. You have the loan officer. You have the processor. You have the underwriter. You have the inspector. You have, the title company. You have the title rep. You have the title processor. You have the title underwriter. Like that right there, like in 3 seconds is 15 people easily on any given transaction. So I would say, to agents, it's, agents, some agents, again, like they carry the weight of the transaction on their shoulder. And I understand that because truly you guys are the glue, but it really does take a village. And curating that village is what makes the agent like truly stand out, is I always say that the smartest person in the room is the person that knows that they might not have the answer to everything. But they know someone who does. So I am always, sometimes clients ask me weird questions and I'm like, I really don't know actually, but let me go see if I know someone who does. And that's part of my superpower is because I don't assume to know everything. I don't assume to, be able to control everything. But I rely on, my network, and truly the agents that stand out are the ones that know this isn't a question for me. Let me call the attorney. Let me call the loan officer. Let me figure out what the inspector meant when he put this in the report, right? Because sometimes it gets lost in translation. So that would be, my advice, to agents, to buyers, to the audience is just never lose sight of everyone that it took to pull this together.
That's beautiful. It is, and it truly is underestimated. People really I think everybody in the business don't stop to think about it, right? They're so eager to protect the client and get to the closing table that most people truly do forget that it takes a whole village.
No,
There's a lot going
amazing.
on in the background that people don't see. So, and it's the relationships that we've all built and having that network and really working together and communicating. I think communication is probably the biggest point. So communicating to get the deal to the finish table and making sure that our clients are protected all the way till the very end.
Correct.
So with that being said, thank you, Stacy, for being here today. We really appreciate it. It's always very important to have a powerhouse that knows what they're doing and getting our clients to the finish line and protected all the way through. So
Well, thank you guys for having me. It's always
Appreciate
a
it.
pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We really can't take enough. You do a lot for us and our team and our clients. And we really only work with people that we love and trust. So you're sitting here with us, and we're just very, very thankful for everything. So thank you.
Well, thank you guys.
Stacy, do you have an Instagram or something that our followers and viewers can follow you at?
I do. So you guys can follow us on Instagram at SAV at Law. That's SAVAT Law. That is our Instagram hashtag. Is that a thing?
We'll figure it out. They'll find you. They'll find you.
Yeah.
All right.
Awesome.
And
Thank
we're
you,
going to put
Stacey.
your information so everybody who's watching here is going to be able to get direct access to Stacy.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Thank you.